Welcome back to Creative Excuses, where we make excuses to be creative, mostly out of ESO on this channel right now. But if you want to see me play other games, I do stream a lot of other games on Twitch. You can check that out at the link in the description. But for today's video, we are going to be covering the Update 33's upcoming combat changes. This is the combat preview posted today, just a little while ago, actually. And I read through it, and it is pretty interesting, so I want to talk about it really quick. So, here we go. Greetings, everyone. Today, the combat team would like to officially welcome you to 2022 by giving you a bunch of stuff on combat. On Monday, we're going to get the patch notes, but today, this is what we get. In Update 33, the changes are focused on making almost every player ability in the game scale dynamically with your highest offensive stats when applicable. Similar to what we've worked on with passives and item sets, we want to ensure you feel empowered to pick an ability or weapon based on the gameplay mechanics and expression they offer you first and foremost, with fewer restrictions. This means any ability that used to scale exclusively with spell damage and max magicka will now dynamically scale with weapon damage and max stamina, and vice versa. With this, we want to retain the identity of many playstyles by reinforcing ability cost as a limiting factor in how frequently you can engage with abilities, but with less concern as to how powerful that ability is, based on what stat path you've chosen. We'll also be dual sourcing buffs on abilities and item sets like Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, the same thing applying to Brutality and Sorcery. In the long term, we plan on simply merging these bonuses so there are fewer names and effects you need to worry about, but there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that will result from that. As such, it will take quite some time before we're able to do that. In addition to the continuation of hybridization, we've also gone through many abilities and cleaned up some of their functionalities, making sure that the ones that aren't used as often receive some sprucing up to make them feel more up to par with abilities of their like. This is in addition to the usual bug fixing and back-end improvements and targeting of outlier abilities or sets for balance adjustments. Some of these are larger in adjustment, such as Power Bash's new functionality of being treated as a bash attack, or Piercing Javelin's new functionality of living up to its name and piercing through block. Most of the adjustments are not as flashy or different, but instead gain added quality of life improvements like increasing durations for easier management or scaling adjustments. For example, the morphs of Lotus Flower giving you the choice of gaining more healing overall, or a significantly longer uptime for less micromanagement. And that's about it from this letter. Okay, so let's go through this a little slower. Let's talk about this first, right here. In Update 33, the changes are going to be making almost every player ability in the game scale dynamically with your highest offensive stats when applicable. Okay, so my first thought with this is cool, awesome. My Night of Madness is about to have a lot of fun because everything's going to scale. It doesn't have to be a heavy attack build anymore. It just gets to be a really funky stamina mage. Cool. Can't wait. It's going to be wacky and fun. But my second thought is, does this mean that DPS builds are just going to be DPS builds? There's not going to be a Magicka DPS and a Stamina DPS? Because at the high end, if all abilities scale off of your highest offensive stats, and your group can provide you enough sustain, is this just going to mean that DPS builds are just DPS builds? They're not Magicka DPS or Stamina DPS or hybrid DPS? Because if all abilities, or almost all abilities, scale off your highest offensive stats, then you just pick whatever's the strongest abilities in your class and on the weapon skills, and it doesn't matter if it's a Magicka or Stamina. Having select abilities scale off your highest offensive stats was fun and unique and interesting. But now that everything is going to do it, I think this actually opens up too much. It gives you too much freedom. It's going to give you both more choices and fewer choices at the same time. More choices will be viable for a Magicka build. More stamina abilities will be viable for a Magicka build. But it's going to mean only the strongest stamina abilities are going to rise to the top, and vice versa with Magicka. So there will be more viable things, but I think the top-end DPS builds are actually going to get more and more restricted. because now you're going to be replacing those mediocre magicka abilities with really strong stamina abilities, or those mediocre stamina abilities with really strong magicka abilities. But with this, we want to retain the identity of many playstyles by reinforcing ability cost as a limiting factor. Reinforcing ability cost as a limiting factor. So that is interesting. So what I'm thinking this is going to mean is they're actually going to increase ability costs across the board. And if they do that, that'll be quite interesting. Partially because it means sustain's going to take a pretty big hit, which is not amazing for solo players, but it does give more value to sustain sets. So that could be pretty cool. And I know they do have a cool new stamina sustain set in this next patch that feels similar to something like Overwhelming Surge, or as you get crits, you get stamina sustain. It's like up to 200 a second, actually, which seems pretty strong. That's 400 stamina recovery from that set. Plus you're getting the 2k, that's like 2.2k stamina on top of that. So it sounds like a pretty strong set. Especially if sustain is going to be an issue. We will see. This could also mean that they increase ability costs, but they use the armor passives to decrease them so that you're still benefiting more from using light armor on a magicka tune and medium armor on a stamina tune. But we'll see. This is going to be interesting. I do think this is going to cause more problems than it solves, though. It will be interesting to see stuff scale, but it's gonna be an issue, I think. I don't think the top end players are going to be happy that everything scales off highest offensive stats. This next bit is pretty interesting, and kind of changes a lot of what my builds have been doing. So we'll also be dual sourcing buffs on abilities and item sets like Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, and Brutality and Sorcery. Does this apply to potions? If this applies to potions, then basically all of my builds, well, a few of my recent builds are trash. My hybrid healer that I just released uses Tooth Row to get Major Prophecy and Savagery at the same time, because Tooth Row and Treasure Hunter, and Cauterize, or what is it, Flames of Oblivion from the Dragonite skill, are the only way to get both of those buffs at the same time without sacrificing 2 skills, or a potion and a skill. But now if you get both of them from one Essence of Weapon Power, or Essence of Weapon Critical, or Essence of Spell Critical, or Weapon Power, Spell Power, if you get both of these from those, then using Tooth Row and Treasure Hunter is pretty much useless. I am still a cheapskate, so I'll probably still use them. But if you can get both of those buffs from your potion, then that frees up an entire set, which is cool, but just devalues those sets even more. Like, they're already mediocre sets because you're sacrificing half of your 5-piece set in order to get Major Prophecy and Major Savagery. But with this, you just like pop a potion and use a better set. It's just that simple. And especially with Rattle Cage and Dread King Slayer. Dread King Slayer at least has a niche because it gives you that major expedition after a kill. But Rattle Cage is just, it's just these buffs and half of a 5-piece bonus. So this will be interesting. If Camouflage Hunter and Inner Light both give Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, then same thing. I have a hybrid Necromancer that is using both Tooth Row, I think it's Tooth Row, and a Rattle Cage that I haven't made a build video on yet, but it's a 1-bar hybrid Necromancer that will trifecta Veteran Vatashran Hollows, and it's using 2 sets that do this, and now if they both come from a potion, then that build is going to be kind of broken, honestly, because I can just pop a potion and boom. So this will be interesting to see, especially since they want to merge these bonuses. That means potions are eventually going to give both buffs, which is gross. So yeah, I'm not super happy about this, even though it's pretty good quality of life and makes hybrid builds even more viable. Still, I'm not super happy about it. In addition to the continuation of hybridization, okay, so this part though, this last paragraph is really interesting. I do like this effect from these changes. So we've gone through many abilities and cleaned up some of their functionalities, making sure the ones that aren't used as often. receive some sprucing up to make them feel more up to par with abilities of their like. I hope that this means that Pierce Armor is great, but that its other morph becomes something like a spammable. I think that'd be super interesting. I know Power Bash is getting that new functionality being treated as a bash attack, which means it is automatically getting a 1500 damage bonus. But if you have something like Deadlands Demolisher and bash runes on it, you can make Power Bash deal a crap ton of damage. PvPers are going to be pissed about this change, I think, or they're going to be really excited. One of the two. Piercing Javelin, this is a Templar ability, right? Pierces through block, that's cool, but I don't care. I want this as a freaking ranged Templar spammable, please. It is one of the most satisfying animations in the game. I don't care about it being a PvP ability. I want to use it in PvE. I want to spam the crap out of Piercing Javelin, all right? And then this one, for example, Lotus Flower is going to give you more healing overall or significant longer uptime from less micromanagement. This will be interesting for some of my builds from my Wardens, because I don't use Lotus Flower because 20 seconds does feel pretty rough for me. So having a significantly longer uptime, if it's like a 40-second buff or 35-second buff, I'd be very happy with that. All right, anyway, summary. Hybridization of all abilities is a bold move. I do think it's going to homogenize builds a lot, especially at the high end. At like my level of play and my level of builds, it might just open up more options and it'll be pretty interesting. It'll make some of my other builds fun to update. But we'll see. We will see. And then this dual sourcing of buffs, I think this, if it applies to potions, is going to be too strong. For hybrid builds specifically, I think it'll be boring as well, because it doesn't limit you and it's limitations that enable fun. Game developers have this idea in their head that taking away limits makes things more fun, but unfortunately that is not the case. If you've watched The Good Place, then you know this. The end of the series is all about how taking away limits ruins people's lives. Limitations are fundamental to human existence, and it's living within those that help us have a good time. Taking them away could do more harm than good. So we'll see how this plays out, but I'm very excited to see how these abilities play out. That is it for me. Again, if you want to watch me stream, you can check out the link in the description for my Twitch page. Right now I'm playing through Horizon Zero Dawn, and Shelby and I, Shelby streams with me, she's my wife. She is playing through Skyrim. So come on over to Twitch, check that out. But until then, I will see you all in the next excuse.